Okay, so today I'll be talking on host pathogen interactions with reference to pathogenicity, virulence factors, microbial adherence, and type of microbial penetrations, which are the main keys for infection establishment. Well, these are the learning points: host pathogen relationship between normal microbiota and host, types of infections, pathogenicity, virulence, microbial adherence, and type of microbial penetration. So, lecture number 1 under this topic is started from here. The host pathogen relationship, first try to understand what is the host pathogen relationship. Host is the one which is being affected or infected by the pathogen, and pathogen could be bacteria, could be virus, could be fungus, could be any parasite. What is the relation between any parasite or any pathogen and host is important to understand. The cost postulate, if you remember in my earlier lectures when we talk about the microbial history, there we talked about the host parasite relation and establishment of disease or infection, and which was postulated by the Robert Koch. Here the host pathogen relation refer to the interaction between the host, that be human, it could be animal, it could be plant, or it could be bacteria in case of phages, as we discuss about the phage bacterial interaction, or any kind of microorganisms, bacteria, virus, fungi, parasites. So that may cause a disease, that is called host parasite relationship. Now if the relationship is being broken, right, then the infection establishment is not possible. So the way to intervene these relationship is basically the mantra for the infection control. So, as you know that not all microbial pathogen or not all microbes cause harms. There might be some good microorganisms, some of the commensal mutualism microorganisms, some they have symbiosis relationship, some they have mutual relationship, commensal relationship. Disease occurs when the balance shifts in favor of the microbes. That's the bottom line. So when the microbes is on the upper hand, then the disease is established. When the microbe is win, so it is not like win-win situation, but it is when the microbe win and the other victim, that is a host, could not defend it, then the establishment of infection or the disease takes place. If you talk about the normal versus pathogenic interaction, there should be one normal interaction. For example, we have a gut microbiota, gut microbiome. They are normal interactions. We have a lot of microorganisms present in our gut, but these microorganisms are not going to harm. So normal microbiota provides the benefits, for example, vitamin synthesis, competitive exclusion of pathogens. Many pathogens are excluded out. So this is very interesting that one of the class of microorganisms may also evade, may also remove the other pathogens. So presence of one pathogens may be benefited or beneficial for the host not to affect the other pathogens. Opportunistic pathogens are those which usually are non-pathogens. They are not harmless pathogens. For example, E. coli, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas. Generally, they are harmless. But if the host defense system is weak, or if it is immunocompromised mode, for example, E. coli, Candida, then it may cause infection or disease. Some are the true pathogens. For example, if you talk about the Microbacterium tuberculosis or Microbacterium leprae, right, Clostridium, these are all true pathogens which cause disease, which cause infection and even severe infection, and may also affect the health. Now, if you look this host pathogen interaction chart, you find the pathogen host susceptibility, how the susceptible the host is, then modes of pathogen shedding, how, for example, viruses, how they proliferate, how they grow, and the reservoir host, how the host acts as a reservoir. Then routes of entry, what is the route of entry, how does it enter, that is called penetration, and mode of transmissions. So pathogen host pathogen interaction basically required these 6, or we call the hexagon model, these 6 component where you can understand how the host is interacting. How the host is interacting. For example, if pathogen is available and host is not susceptible, resistant, then pathogen will not work. Similarly, susceptibility is required for host to interact, for parasite to interact, to pathogen to interact with the host. And what is the mode of pathogen shedding? How does a pathogen enter and penetrate and make the host as a reservoir? Again, this is important. Then what is the route of entry and how does it transmit from one host to another host? This we call the contagious nature of the host. So if you look at this figure or at this table, you find, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I think you can go through it and see what are the different regions where the infection takes place, where the hosts interact through these regions like skin, eyes, nose, throat, upper respiratory region, mouth, that is oral cavity, intestine, urinary reproductive system. So what are the principal components, right? Or what are the bacteria, or what are the pathogens, or opportunistic pathogens, which are basically responsible to attack on these sites, right? And then how does it act? What are the attributes? What are the properties? And what is the outcome of this interaction? And so in the form of like symptoms, in the form of like disease symptoms or effect, right? So all these things present in this table, you can go through it and find, for example, in case of urinary tract infection, right? Streptococcus, Micrococcus, Enterococcus, all these lactobacilli, these bacteria are present in there. So they are all, sometimes they are part of the microbiota of that particular region, and they may cause, so if there's an imbalance of these kind of a host pathogen interaction or host pathogen presence, then you may cause some kind, for example, the lower urethra in both sexes, like in men and women, has a resident population of these microorganisms, especially lactobacilli, and vagina has an acid tolerance conditions. So acid tolerant populations is there in the vagina of the microorganisms because of the nature of the secretion of the vagina. So sometime the gut, vagina, oral cavity, skin, upper respiratory tract, all these microbiota which are present, which are already present and they commensal in the particular site, may imbalance due to certain reason, either the host immunity suppression or some immunocompromised mode, that may lead to the infection through that interactive hexagon interactive model that I have shown you earlier. Now the relationship between the normal microbiota and the host. So microbial antagonism, that is called competitive exclusion. Normal microbiota prevent the colonization by harmful microorganisms, right? By competing for nutrients, producing the inhibitory substances, or modifying local conditions like pH, oxygen level, and some other conditions. So this is called the microbial antagonism. It means normal microbiota which prevent the colonization by harmful microbes. This is called antagonism. One microbes inhibit the growth of the other microorganisms. So because of the following reasons. For example, lactobacillus in the vagina maintain the acid pH of 4, preventing the Candida albicans overgrowth. So this is called antagonism process. It's very interesting because many of the microorganisms may not attack under the presence of one class of microorganisms. Now, E. coli in the large intestine produces the bacteriocin, which is inhibitor for the many bacteria, like many coliform bacteria that inhibit the pathogens like Salmonella, Shigella. So this is one of the advantages. So this microbial antagonism is beneficial for the host. Normal gut microbiota suppresses the Clostridium difficile. Antibiotic can disturb this balance and leading to the severe colitis. So that's how sometimes antibiotics is also causing disease, also causing the infection establishment by some other microorganisms. Now look at this figure. In A, you have a bacteria. This is orange color of bacteria of the surface of the nasal epithelial, and then bacteria brown one, this one on the lining of the stomach, and this is orange bacteria in small intestine. So this is how it interact with the different surfaces of the microbiota on the host. Now the bacteria and the associated environmental reservoirs. What are the different reservoirs where the bacteria persist, lived in, colonized, but they are not infected. They are not infection form. They are not the infectious state. In case of animal, food, human, air, like in environment, and water environment, soil environment, plant. So all these bacteria which are present in these reservoir, in these entities are the reservoir for these. Now, just like antagonism, symbiosis is again, symbiosis means like a close association between two organisms. So, two organisms are very closely related, right? Then at least one is dependent on the other. So, this is called a symbiosis. One is dependent on the other. It means they are not harming the others, but one of them is dependent on the other one. It's called a symbiosis relationship. In the symbiosis relationship, you have the commensalism, that is one benefit host, other is unaffected. For example, Staphylococcus epidermidis. This is the skin surface. Corneal bacteria on the cornea, on the eye surfaces. Then saprophytic microbiota or microbacteria in ear and external genital. These microbial infection or these microbial colonization live on the secretion slot cells and causing no harm to the human, but they are present. Then you have a mutualism, and this mutualism means like both microorganisms benefit each other. For example, in case of gut, E. coli which synthesize vitamin K and some vitamin B absorbed by the host. So host is benefited, and in return the bacteria receive the nutrient from the intestine. Risk of these microorganisms is again in case of antibiotic resistant gene, and that may transfer the pathogen which are present. So, and they may lead to infection in later on stages, or under immunocompromised state, or under some, if a patient is like under some weak immunity, then the infection control could be impossible or difficult. Then parasitism is another mutual or symbiosis relationship where the microbe benefit both host and harm the host. For example, microbe benefited but the host is harmed. This is called parasitism mechanism, parasitism relationship, where, for example, many disease causing microbes like true pathogens are parasites which are dependent on the host and harm and damage the host. For example, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivox, malaria parasite. Opportunistic pathogen or opportunistic microorganisms are normally harmless but cause disease. Now, when they cause disease, when they enter new body site or when the host immunity system is weak. For example, E. coli is harmless in gut, but UTI bladder, pneumonia lungs, and then meningitis in a spinal cord and abscesses in a wound. So these are the sites where if E. coli persists, E. coli grow, the infection may cause some disease condition, disease pathology. Pneumocystic gyrovc cause the pneumonia in AIDS patients, immune suppressed state. Otherwise, it may not cause disease in non-AIDS or normal persons. Clostridium difficile. Clostridium difficile is opportunistic pathogen, but in gut pathogen after antibiotics, it may cause some disease because it may lose and it may cause some disease because some of the microorganisms, they are inhibiting the growth and the proliferation of the Clostridium in the gut. Like carriage of the pathogen in healthy people. It means the carrier. What are the carrier pathogens? So Neisseria Neisseria is one of the species. Neisseria, gonorrhea, Neisseria meningitidis. Meningitidis is basically begin in the throat, but it can cause meningitis in the spinal cord and go to the brain. Streptococcus pneumonia, Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pneumonia, they are normally present in the nose, throat, but can cause the pneumonia. It may change the site towards the lungs. Similarly, adenoviruses, then ecoviruses, they're all may present in the potential cause intestinal diseases, sometimes carried without symptoms, but can cause the respiratory infection after some time. Cooperation among the microorganisms, how the microorganisms are cooperated. Disease can arise not only from the competition, but also cooperation between the microbes. So when the microbes are cooperate each other, they may cause diseases. For example, periodontal pathogens, gum diseases like oral cavity disease, bind to the oral streptococci which colonize teeth or the tooth surface first, and this interaction allow the periodontal or periodontal pathogens to establish infection and cause some tooth diseases. Now, let's talk about the cost postulate. Although in my previous lectures we talked about the cost postulates, but how does it work, and what are the framework for the disease causation, and what are the exceptional cases where the cost postulate do not work or miss one of the postulates or one of the point of the postulates. For example, if you enumerate these, there are basically 4. So they define as the same pathogen must be present in every case of the disease. So for a specific disease, a specific pathogen is responsible in a host. Pathogen must be isolated from the growth from the host, and it can grow in the pure culture. So from the disease site, you can isolate the these host from host site, the pathogens, and you can grow the pathogen. The pathogen from pure culture can again be re-inoculated in a susceptible animal model and cause diseases. Pathogen must be re-isolated from the inoculated animal and shown to be the same as an original. So these are the 4 postulates where the disease establishment has been defined by the Robert Koch. So this is the pictorial presentation with the mice model. What they've done, they identified the pathogens. So microorganisms are isolated from the disease or dead animal, and this microorganism was again recultured in the artificial media, and then they regrow in. So point number 2 is microorganisms are identified after isolation. So 2A and 2B. Then 3 is the microorganisms are inoculated in a healthy person or healthy animal model, and it again cause disease. Number 4, disease is reproduced. Same disease is reproduced in the laboratory animal or experimental animal, and again from the same experimental animal, it can be isolated again and checked. So basically, point number 2A, 2B, and 5A, 5B are same. It means the same microorganisms is proved to be isolated from the disease patient or disease animal model to cause which is responsible for causing the disease. Now, but there are some exception of the cost postulate too. The unique culture requirement, Treponema pallidum, syphilis, it cannot be grown on the artificial media, right? Microbacterium leprae, causing leprosy, it cannot be cultured on the artificial media. So these are some exceptions where rickettsia and viruses, they obligate intracellular and only grow in the living cell. So these are some exceptional cases where cost postulate do not work. The alternative approaches like Legionella. Legionella is a bacteria causing some respiratory diseases, and Legionella we call legionoriasis diseases, where the isolated from the infected guinea pigs and chick embryo confirmed with the immunological methods. Right, unique clinical signs. Some pathogens have distinctive symptoms. For example, Corynebacterium diphtheria cause diphtheria, which is a very clear-cut disease symptoms. Then you have a Clostridium tetani. Again, you have a causing disease disease symptoms. One disease, many microorganisms. This is another hypothesis. So same syndrome can be caused by multiple pathogens. For example, if you talk about the UTI infection caused by E. coli, caused by Klebsiella, caused by some other bacteria. Nephritis, pneumonia, meningitis, and peritonitis. These are caused by the multiple microorganisms. One microbe, one disease. For example, Microbacterium tuberculosis. TB is caused by Microbacterium tuberculosis. Lung, skin, bone, organs. All the TB is caused by the Microbacterium tuberculosis. Then Streptococcus pyogenes, throat infections. Then you have scarlet fever, skin. So multiple diseases are caused by the single microorganisms. So this is again the example, both the kind of examples are available. So one disease caused by many microorganisms, and many microorganisms cause one disease. Now, ethical limitations. What are the ethical limitations? Some disease only infect the human, cannot be tested on the healthy human. For example, HIV. Historically, unethical example. For example, prisoners inoculated with the smallpox, 1721. King George I did this. The rare accidental proof, bone marrow transplantations contaminated with the herpes virus causing cancer. So these are some ethical issues where the disease model are used to check, but there's a need to get the approval from the institution ethical committees before you go for this experiment. Signs, symptoms, and syndromes, right? What are the different signs? What are the different syndromes, right? And what are the different symptoms? Well, so symptoms we call subjective changes in the body function, body functions felt by the patient, cannot be directly observed. For example, pain, fatigue, and then malaise like discomfort. Sign are objectives, for example, measurable changes in the system, body observed by the physicians, and then, for example, fever, rashes, swelling like edema, and paralysis, lesions. So these are all signs. Now, what are the syndromes? A specific group of sign or symptoms that consistently occur together and characterize with the diseases. For example, AIDS. So you have a weight loss, fever, malaise, then like fatigue, and opportunistic infections. They're all kind of a syndrome. So we call these are defined as syndromes. Now, then we have example like AIDS. Then we have a diagnosis. Diagnosis is the word we use for based on the signs, symptoms, and lab test results. So these are some terminology which are important to understand before we look into the host-parasite interaction leading to some disease or infection. Now, let's talk about the communicable versus non-communicable diseases. What are the communicable diseases? Communicable diseases are the spread from one host to another host directly or indirectly. Example, chickenpox, measles, influenza, genital herpes, and then typhoid, TB. So if one person is directly interacting or indirectly interacting, they may lead to some infection spread. So we may also call them sometimes contagious infection or contagious diseases. But contagious disease is also defined as highly communicable diseases, which is the category of the communicable diseases in which the infection is very fast transmitted. So, for example, chickenpox and measles are very, very contagious. If a person having chickenpox or measles in house living together, there's ample chances that the person living in the same house, the same locality or same area may have this kind of a disease, and that's how such kind of diseases, contagious disease infections may also called the epidemic or sometimes pandemic. COVID-19 is a very good example. Whereas the non-communicable diseases are diseases which are not transmitted through any person-to-person interaction, which may be caused by the microorganisms normally inhabiting the body, but causing disease only occasionally in one person. Microbes from environment, right, that cause diseases only when introduced into the body. For example, tetanus is non-communicable disease, although it is called by Clostridium tetani, entering through the wounds. Occurrence of disease, how the diseases occur. So incidence, what are the incidents? Incidence, again, there's some terminology which I use here. Incidence means like number of the new cases in the population during a specified time. So in a specific time period, what are the number of cases occurs of the disease? We call incidence. How many incidences taken place? So we measure the disease spread. If the incidences are more, the spread is more. It is directly related to the spread of the disease. For example, US AIDS incidence in 2014, 37,000 cases. So this is the incidence. Prevalence. Prevalence is used when the number of the total cases, old and new cases at a given time period. For example, in last 2019 to 2020, what are the prevalence of COVID-19 cases? So this is called whether it is in old or new cases, but at that time, what are the prevalence, what are the occurrence of these disease pathogens or disease cases? We call the prevalence of the disease, and how widespread and long lasting the disease is, we can measure the prevalence. Incidence taking place in a particular specific short span of time. For example, in US, AIDS disease spread in 2014 is 1.1 million. So in 2014, the cases occurs is 37,000. But in 2014, if the prevalence found from earlier years till 2014 is around 1.1 million. So this is the difference between incidence and prevalence. Frequency of the occurrence or the frequency of the occurrence of incidence or having prevalence of the disease is basically divided into following categories. So we can classify them as sporadic disease. So sporadic disease or sporadic word is used when it occurs occasionally. It occurs sometime, but other time it may not occurs. For example, typhoid, it occurs maybe sometime of the years, maybe in autumn or in rainy season. Fever may occurs in some countries, like in US, and typhoid fevers is very occasionally. We call it sporadic. Endemic disease means like constantly present in a population, particular population. So we call endemic. So this is kind of like endemic infection in a particular contained population, the infection occurring. We call it like common cold. Epidemic disease may many people. So in this case, the number of people are increased. Many people in a given area acquire the disease in a short period of time. Say for example, in last 2 months, what was the epidemic of malaria epidemic in Delhi or in Delhi NCR? So we call it epidemic disease. For example, influenza epidemic, gonorrhea, like STI, sexually transmitted infection epidemic in some of the regions. Pandemic disease, like which covers the holistic view, that is it is a larger part of the epidemic sort of nature, like a spread of worldwide. For example, influenza, then you can have the COVID-19 is a good example. All across the globe, COVID-19 infection is spread in a particular time period. We call it pandemic. Or AIDS is also pandemic. Herd immunity is another word we learned during the COVID-19 or during vaccination or after vaccination. Herd immunity means like a protection of a population after a certain period of time from the infection or contagious infection, when the large population of the individuals in that particular area or worldwide are immune with that disease or with that pathogen. Again, I take an example of COVID-19. In 2019, 2020, the vaccination has started. In later 2020-21, we found the end of 2021, the herd immunity developed. So the contagious nature or the spread of the COVID-19 virus or SARS-CoV-2 virus is reduced. So not many people get infected, although everybody is not vaccinated. So this is called the herd immunity. Then effect. Even non-immune infections are indirectly protected because the chain of a transmission is interrupted, right? Effect means when the non-immune individual are indirectly protected because the chain of the transmission is interrupted. So the transmission chains get interrupted. Then, for example, the polio, measles control program depends heavily on herd immunity, right? Now, this is the table where you can find some categories, symptoms, signs, syndrome, communicable diseases. So what are the definition? Symptoms like subjective felt by patients, and example, pain and malaise, that is fatigue. Sign is defined as objective, measurable. So you can have this specific sign like a fever, lesion, and paralysis, which is visualized. And syndrome is something, group of sign, number of signs and symptoms we call like 8 syndromes. Communicable is spread through host like TB and influenza. Contagious means early and easily and fast, rapidly spread disease like measles and chickenpox. Communicable, non-communicable is not spread through host to host like tetanus. Incidence is new cases in the time, like this example. Prevalence means all cases at the given time. Sporadic, occasional, and endemic, constant presence like common cold. Then epidemic, sudden. So endemic is also you can define as like the particular community is known by that disease. For example, some area in Africa is very endemic for some malaria or endemic for some other specific parasitic diseases. Filariasis, for example. The pandemic is worldwide epidemic, and then herd immunity is population protected when the majority of the population is immune against that particular virus or particular disease or pathogen. Now, severity of disease. The severity of durations of disease, like acute disease, they are the category of the disease, develop rapidly, lasts a long time, so short time. Example, influenza. The chronic disease is a disease where it has been established for long time. For example, it develops slowly, body reactions, and less severe. Severity is less, but the length is more. The time period of the disease is more. For example, hepatitis B persists for long time. Tuberculosis, like infectious mononucleosis. So these are the diseases where it can go for a long time, but it's not so severe. Person can survive for some time. It may deteriorate slowly, but so this called be chronic diseases. But acute is very fast, quick, occurs very short time. Subacute disease like between acute and chronic. Subacute disease means acute and chronic disease. An example: subacute sclerosis, panencephalitis, rare brain diseases. Right. So this is called as subacute diseases. Then we have a latent diseases. Latent disease means like disease which can be in the host for lifelong, for many years. For example, the causative agents remain inactive and dormant for many years. For example, the shingles, like this is very good example, like varicella-viruses, the reactivation of the chickenpox viruses, cold sores like herpes. It is intermittent infection appearance in a host for many years, maybe till life, till his death or her death. We call it caused by herpes simplex viruses. So now this is all end about this lectures, and I think I will start another lecture soon.